Hello, how are you doing?
Hi, how's it going?
I'm good, thank you.
Am I the first one?
Yes. So we'll wait a few minutes for everybody to join us. So since you are already on, you can check out Canvas and then check out week 1 materials. And so we'll go over that today, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. You can also download the notes and the assignments. I'll go over the assignment today as well after we go over the syllabus. Let me double check the link to make sure everybody has the information. That's good. Hello, welcome to class. How are you? Okay, so since you're here, go ahead and log into Canvas. We'll go over course procedure and requirements, and then we'll do the assignments together. Okay, it's 5 o'clock, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Hopefully more people will join us. Welcome to CIS30E. I am your instructor. My name is Casey Nguyen. I think some of you already had my classes, but if you haven't, I've been working for Moreno Valley College since 2018. I currently overlook the cybersecurity program. This course is CIS30E. It is one of the courses in the Python programming certificate series. Some of you might be taking this course because you are on data science track. This is one of the courses that are required in data science. Now, if you are taking the Python programming courses, if you finish all 5 courses, you will be able to obtain your certificate as well. Or if you just want to take advanced Python programming just to learn more about Python, that will be fine too. So in Canvas, once you logged in, you will find your course information here. And I had opened this up a few weeks before we start, a couple weeks before we start. So our class is regular Zoom meeting, meaning that we will meet twice a week on Tuesday and Thursday at 5 to 7 using Zoom. This course is articulated for UC and CSU transfer. If you're on UCR track for data science, you will be able to obtain some credit in the data science courses at UCR. But if you are transferring to UCI or even UC Davis, we did articulate with the UC for your courses. So for UCI, I think you can either get the 32 or the 33. So you have an option to pick the ones that you can transfer for. So this course will meet the requirement. So in this class, we are going to work with Python. There will be times that we will use Linux, and I will give you the virtual machine or show you how you can create virtual machine. If you have Linux operating system at home on your system, you can, on your computer, you can use that as well, only because the libraries are a little bit better integrating into Linux. Now, you can also use Visual Studio Code in order to incorporate C-based compiler for some of the program that we'll be using. So I will let you know for which lab and how you can download virtual machine or use virtual machine for it. When we start doing concurrent programming, that's more important because in Linux, you will actually be able to measure the performance of your applications and use some of the libraries to be able to incorporate that. So here gives you the description for the course. We are going to work with application scaffolding. We will use prototype for pattern. That would be toward the end. And then we will work with concurrent and parallel programming, where we will design algorithm that's going to be able to allow us to make your program faster, better perform. Along with, we will look at threads, how to build thread pool. So this course touches on how to elevate your program in Python and be able to incorporate libraries to do that. Now, if you move forward from the course information, this gives you your Zoom information for class. I do take attendance for the courses. However, I will release the recording after the class tonight or the next day. And you can find the syllabus on the following page. So next, I'm going to go over the syllabus. As we already talked about the course information, this course required 48 hours lecture and 32 hours lab. And in the course content, it gives you the overall list of what we will be covering. So starting next week, we will work with different areas of Python, including going over benchmarking and how to be able to use memory profiling, and working with some of the library, which are mostly written in C, and Python library that works with C compiler, and then be able to cover some of the areas that you don't get to see in the earlier classes. So in this week, I'm mostly going to review and make sure that we're on the same page, knowing how to work with classes and libraries or modules, and be able to work with strings in some areas. So in the algorithm, we'll focus a little bit more on how we would use data structure and to design our program for improvement. Then we also get into the arrays. So far, if you took CIS30E or CIS30E, you might have covered lists, but we will look at different type of containers to be able to make your data structure improvement in your Python program. And then we will work with mathematical operations, some broadcasts. We'll go into aggregation and transform. And a lot of this terminology might sound very foreign, but the concept we will deliver to really incorporate objects and be able to build more design OOP in Python for your program. There, in the third week or so, we will cover Python or CPython. Some of you might have heard or seen or used it. We can use some of the online compiler, but if you're using Linux, this works really well with that. So you can use CPython or Python. And we will look at how we can share decorations and work with arrays, looking at different data types and also static types. Then focusing on how we would be able to compare object mode versus native mode and for the types. A big chunk of this class is going to be devoted into concurrency because this is how you can use Python in an advanced manner. So we will look at input output, looking at disk and different type of input devices on how that can work with your program, and then how we can use output. So I will show you how you can work with some of the library to be able to create these applications. Then we will talk about features, what that is, and incorporate callbacks for concurrency program or concurrent program. Then we'll get into a little bit of framework. Some of you might have touched on some frameworks in some of your courses, but for Python, normally you see Django or various lightweight frameworks, so we'll touch on that. And then we'll get into reactive programming. And for some of you that would get into web-based programming with Python, this might be important. Then we will differentiate between concurrent and parallel. So we'll go over how to create processes that will be parallel. As you know that your processor are multi-core, so we can dedicate a number of cores into our applications and be able to execute our task. So we will create pool of classes, be able to incorporate interface and write parallel program. As I mentioned earlier, we will touch on threads. So we can use threading or threads libraries in Python and how that can synchronize, so we can write threads that will be synchronized, and how that is different from a parallel program. So you do have a lot of options in how you write your Python program, be able to make it better, be able to execute tasks, especially web-based. So we will touch on that, okay? Then we will have a module that would tie us to the web. So if you want to think about how you can incorporate this for backend with web server, we will touch on web requests and how to use HTTP. Then we'll go into multi-processes, and note that multi-processing is different than concurrent and parallel. Okay, how you can use pool of classes and processes in order to get your program to work. And all that is we are going to set up some wait time for some of the processes. So think of those as when they're idling, and we would execute more important processes for your program task first, okay? Then we'll go into image processing, working with some of the images, working with different scale, and how you will be able to incorporate that. Then we will touch on asynchronous programming. Most of the program that you write is top-down, so the interpreter reads line by line and it executes line by line. So that is really a synchronous program. So we'll talk about how we can design a program that is asynchronous. So we will touch on the different types, and then how we can incorporate threading versus multiprocessing, okay? And using async.io, this is a library or a package that allows us to do that. And we can tie that back to the framework. And then how we can incorporate communications, especially when you're working with web-based, how protocols can be incorporated for the client server applications, okay? Then we'll handle some of the areas that would create problems in our program, how to work with locks and deadlocks, starvations, some of the error or issues that cause our program to slow down and how to address those. And especially on the low level after the OS, how we can look at the IO and be able to handle the task seamlessly. and then addressing security and networking in the application. And then on the last part, we will cover patterns and different types of patterns to be able to use pattern in Python. And you would see that for a lot of different usage, from web applications to even analysis. So that will be helpful for you. Okay, any questions? When are lab hours completed? Okay, so for your labs, you will complete lab with me on Thursday in class. And unlike some of the type of classes that you've had before, as you complete the lab, I give you the lab credits and that will be accounted for. We don't count by the hours. We will be task-based. So Tuesday, I mostly go over the assignments. That's a big chunk of our lecture. Thursday is when we would do hands-on lab. So when you attend the session, you will be able to do lab with me. So I'll walk you through the lab procedure. We'll do exercises together. And then once you complete the lab, you can turn that in and you'll get credit for it. Okay. You don't have to go to the lab room to be able to do this. You can do it with me via Zoom using your computer. You're welcome. All right. So the learning outcome in this class is, first, we want to be able to plan, design, and write scalable Python programs. So when we say scalable, is it's able to grow with the need for the company, and we would want to use scaffolding techniques. Second, we will use many libraries and packages and extensions for Python. And there are times that we will work with data sets. There are times that we would be able to design data structure in our Python program. Then lastly, we will use patterns for dynamic and compatible programs. So those are the things that are mainly addressed in this class. Now, in order to take this class, you have to fulfill the prerequisite CIS30E or CSE8. I've been approving some of the students that attended CSE8 and completed the course through RCC. And Dr. Lair taught the class with a lot of data analysis emphasis. You don't have to use Panda in this class. You can use any IDE of your choice. If you want to use an online interpreter or an online compiler, I'm fine with that. Just keep in mind that some online compiler or interpreter does not accept library or work with some library. So for example, if I'm using an online interpreter that doesn't work with C compiler or handle C compiler, then I would need to be able to use an IDE. So make sure that you have alternate options. And I encourage you to be familiarized with Linux, because Linux is really easy to use, especially with Python. So some of the demo exercises for the lab and the assignments, I will show you how you can use Linux terminal and Linux to write your program and run your program. Most developers use Linux, so they develop for Linux systems, especially for these libraries. So I encourage you to be able to access Linux and use it for our course, okay? And I will show you how you can use your virtual machine for that. So here's the advisory and the prerequisite areas. You should have some programming coming into the class. Now, for our books, you don't need to purchase the book. You can simply use the notes, but if you prefer to buy the book, this is the book that we use, okay? Now, this book focuses on a lot of the things that are listed in the content. And I sequentially go through the chapters. There are times that we are going to combine chapters. So you would see that the chapters will be listed with the notes. For your assignments are due at the end of the week by Sunday. You can turn in your assignment at the end of the session if you're done with it, but I do give you time until the end of the week. So don't forget to turn that in. If you turn in late assignment, every week that it is late is 10% deducted. And I like not to take anything after the third week, only out of fairness for the students that are turning it in on time. However, if there are circumstances that prevent you from doing some of the work, so for example, some student go on military training, or work training, things like that, please let me know and I'll work with you on how you can turn in your assignments. Okay. And so in your graded activities, you will have assignments. I normally walk you through the assignments when you attend the session. If you're unable to attend the session, you will have to watch the video, read the notes, and be able to also read the chapter to be able to complete your assignments. And so for this class, you are going to have a course project. This course project is going to entail all the concept that we cover in this class. I will give you a rubric and project criteria. In this class, I'm pretty open to what type of goals you want to achieve in your application, but your application has to fulfill the technical requirements. So for example, it would have to be a parallel program or a concurrent program, or it would have to have some of the covered libraries and packages that we touch in this class. Okay. Then we will have periodic quizzes. Our quizzes are not too long. Your quiz will be released via Canvas, and you have until Sunday of the week to complete the quiz. I do have quiz review games where you will be able to earn extra credit. So think of it like a review activity for your quiz. So if you do that, it's going to help you study or prepare for your quiz. And there will be a final exam in the class. There's no midterm as we have a course project. And for the final exam, I do use Lockdown Browser. So when you start your final exam, you need to use the browser to be able to access. I understand that some of you feel that Lockdown Browser is not that secure and so on. I do not use webcam, so you don't have to worry about Lockdown Browser monitoring your images. But this is a way that I can protect integrity of my exam, where I don't want student to look up or Google the answer or look up Stack Overflow for the answer, because Stack Overflow doesn't always give you the right answer, right? So we want to use Lockdown Browser. Just make sure that you install that before you take the exam, and you can always uninstall it afterwards. Here's your grading criteria. Your quizzes is 15% of your grade. Assignment and participation is 30% of your grade. Your lab activities is 20% of your grade. So we'll do the assignment and the activities together, and your attendance will work toward the participation. I also expect you to participate in class when we're doing the exercises. Your course project is going to be 15% of your grade. Your final exam is 20% of your grade. And so all of that combined is going to be 100% of your grade. Here's your code of conduct. So for attendance and participation, if a student that missed multiple sessions or multiple weeks, I do reserve the right to drop the students, and I do have a certain timeline to drop. So sometimes that can be carried into a few weeks into the semester. So for the student who wish to drop, that student needs to make sure that look at the college timeline and drop accordingly. Otherwise, the consequence will be W's or could be financial aid charges and so on. If you have any issues with students or other students, make sure you let me know. But for behavior issues or offensive feelings disruption, that can cause in-class dismissal, and then it can be escalated to administration. And this is based on college policy. Now, at this level, I expect that you will write your own program, especially for the course project. Do not copy and paste code, because I can tell by looking at the style of your program whether you wrote it or not. You can reference other open source code and use that as to generate idea or be able to look at how to approach a program, but you should not copy and paste the code. And I do check. So I know that there are a lot of GitHub repository and things that you can look at. However, just try to do your own work, right? Complete your own work, and that's really important. Accessibility. If you need additional test time or any accommodation, make sure that you work with DSS. If you are at Moreno Valley College campus, you can go to the library room 221, or you can email or call. And what they will do is they'll send me a letter for accommodation, and then I will work to accommodate the student based on what's recommended on the letter. So for my contact information, it's listed here. You can also find it on the Canvas page in the first module. If you call this number, it's going to go to my desk phone. I'm mostly here every afternoon toward the night. I do teach in the evening sometimes. On Monday and Wednesday, I teach afternoon and evening. So when I'm here, I can answer my phone. The best way to reach me is through Canvas message or email. And I do respond to your messages within 24 hours. So usually I respond promptly if I'm available. If I'm teaching, I will respond afterwards. Okay. If you wish to get some help or have questions, you can come to my office hours. On Monday and Wednesday, I'm going to be on campus and on Zoom at 12 to 2. On Thursday, I will be on campus and on Zoom at 3 to 4. And if you cannot make this time, then you can email me and I can arrange an appointment with you, like maybe on a Friday or on some evenings. And keep in mind that I do teach classes until like 7 or 8 o'clock. So if you need to meet in an evening, maybe on a Friday or after 8 p.m. Okay. Any questions regarding the syllabus? Okay, so that's the syllabus. And then now what we're going to do is, let me come back here. So I put some resources here for you. My contact information is on this page. If you need my Microsoft Office 365 for your computer to use it for your assignments, you can refer to this page. This course plan is a plan for our course. So as you can see, it lists the chapter. So usually we would have one chapter per week. Okay. There will be some weeks later on because of the topic, we will combine the chapters. So for example, we will touch on how to use Amdahl's law with thread. So we will be able to compute that and then incorporate threads into our programs. And in the later weeks, like processes, so chapter 11 and 12 cover multi-processes. There's a check question. What will the exam and the quiz consist of, multiple choice or writing the program? So the exam will be multiple choice, very similar to the quiz. The quiz is just a shorter version. And the quiz usually cover the prior week's materials. So for example, in week 3, you might have a quiz on unit 1 and 2. Okay, and I do have a final review. So before your final exam, I will go over the final review, which covers all the content for the final exam. You're welcome. Okay, and then for 13, we would see that there's chapter 13 and 15 and so on. So what you would see is you would see that there's some time we will combine the chapters and sometimes we will have individual chapters. Okay, so that will be your course plan. If you have questions and you want to post it here that everybody can see your questions, it could be related to something that you couldn't solve. You can post it here and I occasionally check this, but if you want to ask a private question, it's best to reach me via email or Canvas message. Okay, so then with that, there is a STEM scholarship opportunity. You can check that out. Is Tani suitable? For most part, Jason, I use Tani to demo most of the program, but when we get more into the advanced program, we either use Linux. And so if you have a MacBook, you can use Apple Terminal and be able to run it. But then you have to add in some of the packages through the Apple Terminal. If you use, you're fine with Visual Studio Code. If you want to use Visual Studio Code, that's completely fine. Or I really think that to really write the program, you just need a good editor, right? Like Sublime or Notepad++. But if you want an IDE, you can pick your IDE that would be suitable for you. I don't have a specific choice. Sometimes I demo in Tawny because it is lightweight and it doesn't require a lot of resources, but there are times that I will demo in Linux systems, okay? So majority of the time, Tawny is okay. As I was saying, if you're interested in the scholarship, you can be an RCC student, okay? All you have to do is qualify based on this criteria, and if you're an MBC student, that's fine too. And we still have some spots available as I just qualify some of the students, so you can receive up to $6,000 a year, as long as you maintain your grade and remain full-time. There's no deadline. What happens is once the 15 students approve, you go on a wait list. It varies based on the student. Some student graduate sooner than other or transfer. So when that spot become vacant, I would activate the student on the wait list. So once you apply, we will take a look at your status. And so right now, we just approved 11 candidates, and there are a few that's pending. And if those don't qualify, those spots will open up for other people. So, and it's fairly simple. With the scholarship, you have access to resources. There will be time that you can go to conferences. I will share with you some technical conferences and be able to give you some advice and resources for this program. Okay. Any question? Okay, 1 second, let me. Sorry about that. I just wanted to close the door. Okay, so that's the first module. You can find this here, and this is available until 2027. So if you can't apply this year, or you don't want to apply this year, you can use it next year, and so on. All right, let's take a look at Unit 1. So in Unit 1, you can find the notes here. So once you click that page, you'll be able to find. So every unit, you will find a note document. So basically, this is all the things that we're going to cover in the week. So this gives you the concept. And then with the notes, we want to also download the assignments. Okay, so going back to Unit 1, after the notes, I will post the videos afterwards. You will find assignment 1. So this is what we're going to be doing next. And then, so for this week, we are just going to be reviewing. So make sure you download this. Okay. Now, if you don't have Python installed on your computer, you can do so. Make sure that when you finish the installation, right before you finish, you check the option to set up your system path. Otherwise, it would not link Python packages to your Python program. So that means that when you run your Python program, whatever IDE that you're using, so make sure that you tie that to your system path or the IDE, okay? So any IDE you use will be fine. When you install Python, you would have idle. But if you prefer to use online interpreter, that's totally fine, okay? All right, so in this assignment, we are going to cover some of the basics that we touched on in CIS30E or possibly in CSE8. And we will start with the very basic. So the first part of the notes, it gives you an overview on variables. So in Python, it is not a strongly typed language, meaning that you don't have to put int or double, right? You simply give your variable a name, and as you assign the variable, it would automatically detect what's here to be able to type it. So here, this is a string. So when I declare name as a variable, right, it knows that it is a string type. Now, in some cases, when you use your variable, sometimes when you pass your variable into, like a print function, but you want to parse it, you want to convert it, you can parse it, you can change up the format, you can print out, different parts of the string. So, string slicing is what I covered also in CIS30E. But in this case, it just shows you how you can declare your variable and assign value. Very similar to other programming languages, right? Now, in your assignment value, you can also use integers. You can also put empty strings like this, okay? Now your variable name, it needs to start with a letter. You can use underscore, that is normally used for servers, but normally we just try to use letters, and then after that you can add numbers. So just make it readable, make it easy for you to see, as your program can get very lengthy, okay? So something like this, you can use upper lowercase as well, like this, or like this. Okay, so just apply good practices in naming your variable or your identifier for your container. Now, so you can also assign several values to several variables at the same time. So in this example, on the bottom of page 1, we see that J is a variable, K is a variable, and L is a variable. And with that, we want to assign shark for J, 2.05 for K, and for L, we're going to assign it 15. So what the Python interpreter, what it would know is it's going to type it accordingly based on your assignment. And in Python, you would use the comma as your separator for your variable. And the comma is going to again be used as separator for your assignment values. So when we print this out, when we print J, right, it's going to print sharp. When we print K, it's going to print 2.05. And when we print L, it's going to be 15. So, and you see this in C++ and other languages as well, right? We can do one line for multiple assignments of our variables. So the output is shown there. Now, as we look at this example, we would then do the first question. In the first question of your assignment, it asks you to write the Python script that assigns multiple values to multiple variables at the same time. And I want you to give me the screenshot of the script and the output. Okay. So what I'll do is I will show you my version of it. And so this is Tawny that I'm using. You don't have to use Tawny, but for the sake of the exercise, it's really simple. So I'm going to use this IDE. Okay. But if you have idle from the Python package, that's fine. Once you use the editor to write your program, save it as a Python file, which is .py, and then run it. Or you can write it into, like, if you're using Jupyter Notebook, and so on. So that will be fine too. Okay, so here in this exercise, and this is just my version of it, you don't have to make it exact, right? You can do your own. I have a variable called name. The second variable is called age, and the third variable is called weight. And I use the comma as the separator, and you can give it white space if you want, right? And then for my assignment, for the first variable, I'm going to assign it Maria for the name. The age is going to be 22, which is an integer. And the weight here, we're going to use 130.24. That's going to be float. Now we can use the same thing as the example where we will print each variable on each line, or we can print it all on one line. So when I run this program, it shows me first variable, second variable, and third variable, right? And then on the last print, it prints all three together. And so that's all really needed for the first exercise, is to be able to declare the three variables or more and be able to assign it all in one line. Now, so if we only want to print all three in one line, right, that will make it 2-line program for you. So that's really simple. This touches on just how to use variable in Python. Any question? Okay, very easy. Next, sorry, let me close this. Next, we're going to touch on global variables and local variables. And if you took C++ or Java, you're probably familiar with this, especially C++, right? In Python, you can declare what type of variables is local variables. A lot of the time, Python is more intuitive in how you use the variable, okay? So in CIS30E, I touch on how to declare your local variable and how to use your local and global variable. So here, what we have is we have GLB var as your variable name. And what we did was we assigned it the string global. So in the second part here, you would see that here in Python, we would define a function. And to define a function in Python, we just use def or def. And then we would finish that line with a colon. Now, in the function, we would have the local variable called LCL var. And we assign it local. And we print. Okay. So this variable belongs to this function. And then after that, we call the function or the method. So in Python, they refer to this as method, but we're familiar with function as we learn other programming language, right? So you can call the function after you declare it, okay? Python does have a main, so you can call it. So technically it's here, but you can specify the main function if you want. Here, you just call the function. And then after that, we would print the global variable. So notice that very similar to C++, your global variable is at the top, and it's going to see that as a global variable, which can be used in other functions. And then your local variable is only going to be used within that function. Okay. So that's the difference, is this belongs to this function, whereas the global can be used in other areas. Any question with this? Okay, so that is going to help us answer number 2. Let me pull up my instructor version real quick. So for number 2, it asks you to specify the difference between global and local variable. So your global variables exist outside of the functions or methods, where the local variables exist within. And in some cases, right, you want to use global across or down your program where local is going to be used only within that function. Any question? Okay. So at this point, after we already took introduction of Python, we should be comfortable with using container like list, right? Using our numerical operations, using some of the built-in or Python package methods. Okay. So in the next part, after global and local variable, and I pulled this from 30A, so some of you have probably seen this. Here it touches on some of the functions that comes equipped with the Python package. So if you install Python, right, you will be able to have access to these methods. And these methods work with values or numerical values. So here we would have abs, that gives you the absolute value of the number. Ceil, very similar to other languages like JavaScript, Java, right? This gives you the ceiling value, so it rounds up. Okay. Then floor is the floor value of the number. It rounds, so it drops the decimal point here. It gives you the whole value here. So 4 is going to be the output, where this rounds up to from 3.56 to 4. Okay. Then you can also have round, which rounds off the number of the digits and return floating point number. So if you still want what we call decimal floating point numbers, it's going to round 0.6792 to 0.68. So you can use round to round off the decimal points. Now we can also use format to control this, or dot format, but you know, in this case, we already have access to these methods, so we want to be able to use that. Max would return the maximum value. So if you have a container of many numerical values, you can use max method to identify the largest or the highest value. So in this case, it's going to give us 80 because 80 is the highest value in the list. Then your min is going to give you the minimum or the smallest value in that container. So here I have a list called numList. And in this list, I assign different values here. So as 11 is the highest and 2 is the lowest, right? I want to use min to be able to pull the lowest value. So here we can print the minimum value. Then you have sum, which adds up all the value in the container. So this will give us the total of all those numerical values. Now you can use sum in two ways. I show you some example here. This adds up 1, 2, 6, 3, 4 when you pass the variable val, which is the list. And then if you want to add another value to it, you simply use the comma and then you put the second parameter. Can you go over the ceil and the floor? Okay. In low rounding is done with dot format compared to the round. Yeah, so the low rounding, so when you use a dot format, you basically control the precisions or how many decimal point values or floating points you want to include. So format allows us to control, let's say 5 decimal points or 2 decimal points. So I can have $1.99 versus when you're using round, right? It forces, by default, it's going to be to the 2 decimal point. Okay. Coming back to seal and floor. So here in the seal, it uses the math library. So you have to use import math. And I have a variable called myvar. I assign it 3.56. Notice that when it's higher than 0.5, it's going to round up, right? That's just practical math. So when we print it with the seal, so when you pass this variable in the seal or the ceiling value, it's going to round it up, okay, to 4 as a whole number. So when you want this to round up, you would then use the seal method or function. If you want to round down, you would use the floor. So here, again, I'm going to use import math library. So I use the math library here. I have a variable called fruit price, and the value that I assign is 4.56. Now, as this variable is passed into the floor method, it's going to take this value and it's going to round down even though it is higher than 0.5, right? So it's going to drop these decimal, the position or the floating values here, and it's going to make it a whole number. It's going to round down. So ceiling round up to the whole number, floor round down to a whole number. Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions? Now round is going to let us keep the decimal values, but less. Okay. So when I have 6.6792, it's going to take this, drop it, because 9 here, it's going to round up the 7 to the 8. So it's going to reduce the precision point for the float right there. And so as you work with possibly data analysis, you might need to be able to use some of the methods to be able to round things off. Okay. So in our assignment for number 3A, we want to display the minimum value in this list, 13, 4, 27, 9. And automatically we would know that it's 4. We want to output the 4. But I don't want to use the index to do that. I want to use the min, right? Because the question calls for the built-in methods from Python package. So the first step is to declare the list. So you can give it a name and then assign the values. Then the second step is to use the min method to identify the minimum value and output, which makes us use the print. So I can show you how that's done. I hope you can see. Let me clear this. So here, what I have is a list called my list, and I assign it 13, 4, 27, 9. That's what the assignment called for. Now, if I wanted to print display minimum, I simply, let me move up and separate this. I simply do a print, which is going to display, and then in that I would use the min method, and inside the min method parameter, I would pass the min list. which is my list that I declared in the previous line. Now, if you ever want to output the max, right, we can display maximum value by doing a max. And so if you want to be fancy, you can say max value is, right? And separator. And then we can also say min value is. I think Python add the white space anyway. So here. So now we will be able to print. So my minimum value is 4 and my maximum value is 27. So for 3A, we only need this part. Okay. So with that, what we did was we used the min method and we passed the list. So the purpose of this is to jog your memory, right? In case, you know, just to brush up. And then starting next week, we'll go into more concept that's advanced. Okay. Any question with 3A? 2 lines, pretty easy. Okay. Then in 3B, it asks you to use round. So round the number to the next whole number. So we cannot use round here. We actually have to use seal, right? So here I have 3.147, which is the given value. I can assign a variable with 3.147, and then I simply use a seal method. So for 3B, make sure that we start with import math as it is a library that we need. And after I import the library, I would then assign my variable. So here I have my num, and it would be 3.147. And then I want to print display rounded number. So here I wanted to display the whole number, but it's going to round up because I'm using seal. So let me clear this. And I'm going to go ahead and run. So here it's going to round it up to 4. That's the output. Okay. So when you're using seal, it's going to round up. Doesn't matter if it's less than 0.5 here. Okay. Any question? Okay, so again, that's pretty easy. In this one, make sure that we use math library and seal method. All right, so that will be 3B. Now for C, it asks you to display the result for 36 to the 3rd power. I have a question. Should we be following along with your own assignment? Sorry, I missed that. You can write your own program, but the whole point in this is when I demo, you can definitely follow along. So this week is just review, so I would go over, and there are times in the class as well in the lecture that I will demo the program. So if you like, you can follow along. Or you can watch, and I will release the video. You can also come back and rewatch the video as well. That's fine too. Okay, so here for 3C, it tells us to display the result for 36 to the third. Okay. So in your notes, after it talks about the sum method on page 3, you will be able to see how we can use exponent. So when very similar to other languages, you would use POW as a method, and you would have x to the y. So here our base, which is x, that will be 36, and y, which is the exponent value, that will be 3. So you simply use 36 comma 3. So the example here is if we do 3 to the second power, we would then just do print POW 3 comma 2 like this, which outputs 9. Okay. We can also use the percentage symbol with the exponent, so that way we can raise the base value with an exponent and use mod or modulus at the same time. And Python allows you to do that when you're using POW with the third parameter. So here we would have POW, the base is going to be 4. We're going to take 4, raise it to the second power, so 2 is the exponent, and the mod value is going to be 3. So that will be 4 to the second power mod 3, and it's going to output 1. So 4 to the second, that gives you 16. 16 mod 3 is 1. Okay. You can also use square root by using SQRT, right? This is the square root method. So there are many, and this is just highlighting the basic math operation methods. So in case you need to implement that in your program. Okay. Again, for the square root, we would do import math, but we don't need to do that with POW. Okay, so let's try to address the next exercise, which is C3. So for C, I need to write a program that displays the result for 36 to the third power. Okay. So we simply do a print. Then inside print, we would have POW. That's going to handle the exponent. And our base is 36, and our exponent value is 3. And so we would then be able to output. So let me clear this. So now if I run this, right, it's going to tell me this is the result, 46,656. So you can pretty much use this with any of the values, right? As long as you're familiar with the built-in methods for Python package. Any question? So that will be 1C. So when you submit your assignment, you can just screen capture your your code and your output. Okay. You can use Windows Clip, or, you can hit print screen button on your keyboard and then paste it into the document. Do screenshots of the questions need to be included with the code? Yes, I need to see your code and your output. So what I prefer is you would put all the screenshot on one document, like if you paste it into our assignment document and then submit it. Okay, so that way you don't have to upload like, I don't know, so many different images. It takes a while to do that, I understand. So just take a screen capture and then paste it into the document and then upload one document. So if you're using Windows like I am, you can do snip like this, okay? And then just snip it like that and then paste it into your answer. Other questions? Okay. So far we've done exponent. And then lastly, on the next part, part D, it asks you to use rand range to display pseudo-random number in increment of every two numbers between 100 to 500. Okay, so let's talk about rand range. Now, when you're using random module or library, you can use randint. And so this is a built-in method that randomizes values, integers, and you can specify on where it starts. So if I want 100 to 500, it will be 100 and then 500 in the parameter there. But you have to import the module, which is random. So this is specifically for integers. So you're using randint. Okay. So let's say that you have to randomize, you have to create a group of numbers that are randomized, and then we want to append that to a list. You can use randint. Okay. So here, the example shows you how you can do that. I would start from 0, go through 10. I can also use negative values. So start from -10 to -1. I can do -5 to 5 or 5,000 to 1,000,000 and so on. The second method that we can cover in random is rand range. So this is going to give you randomized elements. And similar to randint, you're going to have a start value, a stop value, and how you want it to step through. So recall that our assignment tells us we're going to increment every 2. So the third parameter is going to be that value for increment. So the step is the integer that would specify the incrementation. If you don't put anything for the third parameter, it's going to default to 1. It's going to go every 1. So if I say start from 100, go to 500, and I don't put anything here, it's going to step through every 1. Okay, as it randomized. But if I wanted to increment by 2, then I would put 2 here. Okay, so in this example, it shows you how you can use rand range. We would start at 100 and go to 1,000, and we would step by 2. So increment by 2. But notice that unlike the other method, right? Okay, here, because this is part of your random module, we are using a method from that module, which uses a superclass. So what you have is you are going to state random.rand range and then your three parts parameter. Okay. And then the second part of that example, it's just going to step through every 3. So now let's take a look at what I did for parts. Did I put that together? I might not. Oh. So here's the rand range, right? You can simply use the example. So we can print, we can say that we are going to generate random number between 100 to 500 and increment by 2. And then in that we can use random.randRange. And don't forget to import the module. You can do it this way, or you can simply do a print, right? Random.randRange. And then 100 to 500 and skip every 1 or increment by 2. That will be the same thing. I just added the text to show what that is, like the example. So let's clear this. Okay, so the first round, when I did this, it gave me 164. The second round, it gives me 356, right? Different numbers because it's randomized. Well, it is pseudo-random because it's seeding at the same value. So if you wanted to know their seed value, you can read their documentation, this library documentation. And when we come back to this, when we talk a little bit about operating system module and how you can use system time to be able to seed and to have truly randomized value, right? So in most of the time when we're using random module, it is pseudo-random. It looks random, but it seeds at the same value every single time. So a truly random value, it has to seed at different values every time. So incrementation means how it skips. So it's gonna increment, so it's gonna go every other number to pick a random value between 100 to 500. Okay. So if you start at 100, then it looks at 102, 104, and so on. So based on that group of number, it's gonna pull 1, which gives you 164. Then for if you can change on how it increments, so we can make it skip a little bit farther. So I can put in 5, for example, right? So it's gonna do every 5. So when we use 2, it's every other. So it would always be an even number in incrementation of 2, yes. You're welcome. Other questions? Okay, so that shows you how we can do rand range, which is 3, what was it, D? Yep. Now you can do all of this on one program and then take one screenshot. That's fine with me. Okay, you don't have to do them individually like I did. I just did that to show you individually. Okay. Just whatever's easier for you. Any question? Okay. So this was covered in 30A. Now let's move into conditional and iterative. Let's look at the notes. So here it talks about if statement, and as most of you are familiar with if statement in Python and other languages. This is how we control the flow of the program. This is very important in many different types of programming, in conditions for your applications to generate certain output, or even for input validation, for many different things, okay? Or even security scripts. That's also important. Wait for certain service to start and then do this. Or when we're looking at like Trojan, right? Like something like a keylogger, it's going to wait for the user to hit the keyboard. So it's going to wait for the input signal in order to output that into a certain file or contact a certain server and generate the recording of all the input. So there's many application in how we can incorporate conditional statement. Okay, so in an if expression, your test expression is always going to test true to execute the body. Okay. Now with the if else, if it does not test true, then it's going to execute the body of the else. So here in this example, I have a value 3 is assigned to num variable, and I wanted to test to see if it's larger than 0. So I can say if num is greater than 0, print positive number. Okay. And so this is the body of the if. And in Python, you got to make sure that you follow the if statement with a colon, not a semicolon, a colon. Okay. Now, for the second part of the program, I have a negative value assigned to num, which is the variable, and I wanted to test to see if it's greater than 0. It is not, right? We know that negative value is not larger than 0. So what happens is it's going to skip this, and it's going to go here because this does not test true. So in an if statement, it only executes the body if the expression tested true. Okay. Then the next part is on the if else, and I touch a little bit on this. So if the expression is not true for the if, then it's going to go to the else. Okay. And we see this in like people adding things to shopping cart, right? If it's a food item, we're going to charge them with tax. So you can say if it is a food item, right, add tax. And then add that to subtotal. Okay, so on this one, it shows you the example of if else. So num is a -5. And if num is greater or equal to 0, so this expression is not true because it's a negative value. So it's going to skip this. It's going to go to the else body, and it's going to execute this. It's going to display negative number. Okay. Pretty easy. Any question? Since we're here, we'll talk about if else. So this is a way that you can nest if else into another if else in Python. And we would use elif. So very similar to the last two part, it's going to test the expression. If that's not true, right? It's going to go here and test the next expression. If that's not true, it's going to go to the else. So it would only execute the body of after the expression is tested true. So going back to our example, like for the food e-cart, right? We can say that if the customer buy food item, do not charge tax, or if it's the non-food item, charge tax. And if it's multiple items, we can give them discount. Is else required at the end, or can you have if and elif? You need to have an else at the end. So by practice, you always assume, right? Especially with user input, in reality, if it doesn't test true here, it needs to check this. But if you don't have the else here, if it doesn't test true here, there's nowhere else for it to go. So your program flow is going to stop there if it doesn't test true. So we should always allow it to branch both ways. If it's test true, execute this. If not, it executes this. Because if you force it to only branch here, it's going to stop. It's going to stop at this branch if it doesn't test true. Okay. So logically, always include the else. Other questions? Okay, so more example on this, right? Negative 5.2, check to see if it's greater than 0. It is not because it's negative value, so it's going to skip this. Then it's going to check this. Is it equal to 0? No, right? So it's going to skip this. Then it's going to go to the else. I like that there's no additional things. Yes, you can do if else inside if else. That's okay too. But Python lets you skip a couple of lines by doing elif. Okay. So that's kind of nice. Or a nested if with an else. That's what it would look like. You can also nest if like this. So check the criteria here, right? Then it's going to check the next one. If that's true, then it will print, because we say greater or equal to 0. Is it equal to 0? Then it's going to say it is 0. Otherwise, it's going to go here and it say positive number. If not that, on the outside, it's going to output negative number. Okay. So depending on the objective of how you want to control, right, the outcome of that part of your code, and you can determine how you want to use your conditional statement. Okay, so let's pause there and come back to the assignment now. For number 4, it asks you to use conditional and iterative statement, which we'll talk about for loop in a little bit. For A, given that A is equal to 100, B is 150, compare the values using conditional statement and display the lower value. So we wanted to check to see which one is lower, and if it is lower, we're gonna display the value. Okay. So we would assign a variable, assign another variable. Then we can say if A is less than B, right, display A. Very easy, or print A. So then for, which one is this for? Well, for A, we're just simply using an if. Sorry, I changed the value to show the test when I taught this last. So let me clear this. All right, so A, we assign it 100. For B, we assign it 150. We can say if A is less than B, print A. Else, I use else with this, print A is not less than B. Okay. And you can be more fancy in how you want to print, but simply this would meet the objective of the program or the requirement. So when we run this, right, So with this, it checks this expression. A is definitely less than B. 100 is less than 150. It's going to execute the print here. It's going to forget this. Okay. Any question? Now let's say that I omit the else. Okay. Going back to our question earlier, and I change this up to 200. And let me run this. Nothing, right? Because why is that? Well, this condition is not true. So it's not going to do this, and there's nowhere else for it to go. So the program just doesn't output anything there. So we always should try to follow it up with the else, right? So now if we add the else and we run this, right, it tells us, oh, A is not less than B. So we have an output based on the condition. Any question? All right. So even if you use if else or if else, right, would always to follow it up with the else there. Okay. Let's come back here. So in Python, our loops consist of for and while. There's no do while, right? For loop is commonly used to iterate through container elements. So you can go through each of the elements in a list or a group of items in the container using a for. Similar to what you've seen with the conditional statement, iterative statement needs to finish with the colon there. So you would say for, right? This val, I use val as in I, right? So if for val in sequence, and then your body of for, what do you want to do? You want to print out each of the item. You want to sum all the items. Okay. So for each item in the sequence, yes, then it's gonna execute the body. Then for no, it's gonna exit. So here we have numbers as a list. So I have these values. And I initialize total as in 0. We can say for val in numbers for every value in this list. We're gonna take them and add them together. Okay, so this is what we normally call a running sum. So every loop is going to add the subsequent item. Then after that, we print. So the total of this is going to be 48. In Python, it also allows you to use range function. Range allows you to have a start, a stop, and a step. The third parameter is how it's going to increment, like what we've seen in the random. So if you don't have a start specify, it's going to default to 0. And if you don't have the step or the increment, it's going to default by 1. So range allows us to return a sequence of numbers. So you can say, I want to return values between 10 and 50. And if I don't put anything for the third part, it will just increment by 1. But if I wanted to skip every other, then I'll just put 2 there. Or if I want to skip every 3, I'll put 4 there. Okay. So here what we have is we have val is the variable, and we would use the range method. We're going to start at 3 and we're going to go to 6. And we can use a for loop to access the sequence. Okay. Then we're going to print. So it's going to give me 3. Four and 5. So why is that? Because it starts at 3, then go to the next number, which is 4. Why is it going to 4? Because the default is 1 if you don't put the third parameter. Okay. So that's the for loop. All right, let's take a look at the next exercise. So for 4B, it says 4 vals is 10, 20, 30, 40. Increment each value in the given list by 5 using iterative statement. So we have to use a for loop here. Okay. And we need to step through by that value. So now let's do 4B. Now notice that I'm not using range in this. You can use range, that's way easier. Okay, for 4B. I'm simply using a for loop. So how I can increment by 5 is to do that. So what I'm going to do here is I need to take this and then add it with 5 and so on. Okay, so here's the list, vals, 10, 20, 30, 40. This is given to us in exercise 4B in our assignment. We have a for loop for I in vals. And what we have here is we would take I, we want to increment each by 5, and we're going to print. Okay, so let's run this. So I take the first value. First round, it's going to take 10 plus 5 gives us 15. Second round, it takes 20 plus 5 gives us 25, and so on. So by the end, we have 45 for the last round. Okay. So this is how we can do the increment of each of the item in the list by 5, given the list 10, 20, 30, 40. Using a for loop. Any question? Okay. So that touches on our for loop, and we will touch on while loop next. This is just to review. So I want to jog your memory. Some of you finished Python courses a while ago. Some of you finished it last semester with me. So So we just did 4B. In the next part of number 4C, it says use while statement to double the values and calculate the sum for x is 5 to 16. Okay. So now let's talk about while. So we can use while to iterate through the container. And with the while, we can implement the test expression. So as you see with the diagram here, if the test expression is checked true, okay, it's gonna go and execute the body as long as it's true. Anytime that it's false, it's gonna exit the loop. Now, some programmer would have it infinitely looped, so it's always gonna check true. Ideally, for resource, right, we want to think about how it would be able to exit the program in certain cases. So when it checks false, it's going to exit the loop. Okay. So, and with the while loop, just like for loop in Python, we would have that statement with a colon, and then indentation is important for the body. So here, okay, we still do a running sum, and we can do a running sum with while. We have n is equal to 8, or n is 8. Your total initialized at 0. Your I is going to be 1. So here in our while statement, we have while I is less than or n equal to n, or equal to n, we're going to add the value, right? So we would have total, we increment the value. And we need to update the counter. Then we would print. So it's going to still output the sum, but using the while loop. Now, the easiest way in Python is to use the sum method, right? Declare your list, do the sum method of the list, like what we've seen earlier. But this is how you can also increment. You can use incrementation with while loop to add. Okay, so let's address number 4C. We need to double the values and sum for x is 5 to 16. Okay, so similar to the example that you see there. So I have the start, which is 5. So I would declare x and assign it 5. That's the start. And n is going to be our stop value, so 16. So we would initialize n as 16. Because we are also doing a running sum as we double the value, we need to initialize total to store. Otherwise, it's not going to be able to retain the value. So we want to initialize the total. Then we can say while x is less than or equal to n, colon, indent, total is total plus x. So here we're going to be able to sum it. And we want to update the counter. So x is x plus 1. But the question calls for us to double. So we would have total times is total times 2. So we would do a compound operator with the 2. And so after we double, we would be able to print. So let me clear the output. Let's run this program. Okay. Now you can have it print within for every round to check the value, but this is okay. Okay. So we would have the total after it double is 49,116. And so you can reference the example. The only main difference in this program compared to the example is we did double after we added the values for the loop. Okay. Any question? So having these options, you can use different form of loops to be able to implement iteration in your program. You don't have to use a while loop. You can use a for loop. You can also consider methods like range, depending on your objective, what you want to do for that part. Okay. Any question? Okay, so as we complete these, just provide screen capture of your code and your output. You can do multiple program in one and then do one screenshot, or you can have them separate. That's fine too. Like I said before, put it all on one document so there's only one upload for you instead of doing multiple images. Okay, upload, which takes time for you. So easiest way is to put it all in one file and then upload. Now, make sure that you don't give me .pages if you're using Mac, right? Mac OS, because I cannot read .pages. So any assignment that you submit, it needs to be in .docx, which is Microsoft Word document, or PDF. So if you're using like other form of application for your document, make sure we convert it to PDF and upload. Okay. So I'm going to try to hit all of this. If not, we might bleed into the lab session and finish it up. So I want to make sure that I cover. I don't like leaving my student, trying to figure out an ambiguous assignment. So all point in this is to help us review. And then moving forward, we will touch on more advanced stuff. But if we don't know the basic, we cannot go forward. So as some of you are coming from different courses, I want to make sure that we're on the same page. This might be really easy for most of you. Okay, so for 5, it asks you, given the list, new list, and this is a 2-dimension list, right? 2D list, which is a list nested in a list. We want to write the Python script that display each element in this container, new list. Okay. So very similar to what you've seen with 2D array. Think of it as a table grid. So in your notes, let me see. Here it touches on break. We didn't have to do an exercise for the break, but if you haven't learned break, you can look at this section. Break just allows you to stop the current loop, and then it would resume on the next line in the program. Okay, sometimes you can force it to stop by using break. So this is how the diagram looks. Okay, so if you add the break here, it's going to exit the loop like this. And then similar to that, you would have the continue statement. So this allows you to return to the beginning. Okay. And here we would see that in the for loop. I included a bunch of other methods that you can use. A pen is super useful, especially if you want to add values to container or even characters into strings and so on. So you can do a pen. You can change the size of your list by adding elements to it and so on. So there are many different things that you can look at or methods. For our next exercise, we can go to page 13. It talks about 2D lists. So this is nested lists. It's a list that holds other lists. So anything more than 2 dimensions should be a dictionary in Python. Don't bother doing like a 3D level because dictionary is way easier. Okay, so 2 dimension is, you know, normally we can use a nest this way. So we can implement a nested for loop to access the list within the list. And not just a regular for loop, we should use a for range. And when you use the for range, you need to put length so that way it needs to go through the entire sublist. Okay. So on the outer for loop, we are going to go through the list. The inner for loop, right? We're going to go for the inner list. So here, what we have is we have for I in range, and we're going to go through the entire container. And then for the inner loop, we are going to access the item within. And so with I and J, these are going to represent the items within the list within the list. Okay, so this J is going to access them. You can test each by doing the print for each of the loop here, right? We can print for the inside and then we can print for the outside. Okay. So on the first print, it's going to give you the list, which is what we've seen in decoration here. In the second print, it's going to print individual sublists. This one first, and then the second sublist. This one next. So in the dimensions, what we see is we can think of it like a table, right? Index 0, 0, that's going to be the 2, this first one. 2, 1 is going to be the next one. 0, 1. 0, 2 is going to be the next one. 6 on the first list. And then when it moves it into the second list, that will be index 1, 0, which is the 3. 1, 1, which is the next, the 6. 1, 2, which is the 9, and so on. Okay, so refer to this example. Now we are going to take a look at the exercise. So this is the list that we require to use. So basically we declare an assigned value for that nested list. then we can use the for loop or the nested for loop for range. So we can say for I in range length and our list name, which is new list. The inner for loop, we can say for j in range length new list I. That's very important, don't forget. And just like before, our for loop needs to finish out with the colon. We want to print, and here we would access the index, so ij. You don't have to have the n here, that just gives you output length. Okay. And then the outer print. So when we run this, okay, you access all the items in the list. And for when you're using container like this, it's best to use for range like this in Python. So what it is accessing, right, the sublist. Question. So notice that when I pass this in here, look at the difference, right? So as it finished the sublist, it's going to give me the entire nested list on the outside. And same thing for the second sublist. Any question? Okay, so that address exercise 5. Okay, so as we have about 10 minutes left, I'm going to try to get through 6 and 7. That leaves us 8. Maybe I may want to make it, but I don't want to rush. If we do run over time, I will cover the rest on Thursday, and then we'll address the lab also. Okay, which is, we'll move into a little bit more advanced stuff after we leave the basic here. So this week is just going to build you from the very basic to a little bit more like all the topics that's covered toward the end of the intro class. And then we'll pick up next week after that. Okay. All right, 6. 6 asks you to write a script that comprehend a dictionary, and that would have course name, grade, completed semester for a student, right? And we want to screenshot our code and our output. So to look at the example for the dictionary, here it talks about tuple. The main difference between tuple and list is that tuple is not as flexible. You can't add a bunch of values to tuple. It's pretty static. So how you define it, you're going to print it. So if you want to keep your container the same, a lot of the times you would use the tuple. In some cases, if you're using a certain library or a certain method from a library, you might output a tuple. So the way that Python uses tuples with the parentheses. Okay, you can also nest a list into a tuple. Okay. And so this is the example for that. You can nest a tuple into a tuple. So it's just another form of container that's different than your list, which is different than array, by the way, and we'll touch on array. Okay, so now let's move into the dictionary area. So there, if you want to practice tuple, you can look at the example. So dictionary is very popular. We use dictionary for a lot of things. So ultimately, it represents a collection of items. And in the dictionary, you would use keys and values. Okay. So for example, I would have a dictionary called my dict, and it would have name is Jack, age is 26. And we want to print out the name and we want to print out the age. Okay. So to output the age, we would say the dictionary name and we would use the get method. And the way that you get the value is by passing the key. So age is the key, name is the key. So that's how it's able to give you the output. Now, if the key doesn't exist in the dictionary, right, it's going to give you none. So you can add new items to the dictionary. You can also remove by doing pop. You can also clear everything by using clear method. So now if we want to do a dictionary that would have course and information about our classes, we just need to declare it. 6. So, and you don't have to follow exactly like this, right? I have a dictionary called My Class, and dictionary use curly brace. So your key is going to be course, and then we would use a string to say our course name. And then the grade, you can use a value like integer or A, right, as a character. Semester, we also use a string, so we can say winter 22, like this. And we will print the dictionary. So when we run this, okay, it gives us the entire dictionary, so that comprehend the items in the dictionary. Here's our key, which is course, its value, which is 30A. The next key is grade. Okay. Now, another way that you can do this, right, you can also use the get method. Keys are always in quotes around them. Yes, because, well, it's how you use it. But a lot of the times we use text. So that would always be quotation mark. You can use single or double in Python. It doesn't matter. But because it's text-based, that's why it's quotation mark. Okay. Yeah, so a lot of the times we use our keys as in string. Now, if you look at the example, okay, coming back here, if I want specific value for a key, I can also do this, right? So let's say that I copy this real quick. Kind of And I wanted to make this grade like this. We just want to display our grade, right? So we can say print dictionary get grade like this. Oh, sorry. Okay, let me see my trace back. Yeah, so it says it's not. I apologize. I forgot to change this. My class. Okay, there we go. That's better. Let's try that again. Gotta copy and paste it over from the example, and the dictionary is different. So if I want to only look at the grade, I simply use the get method. Okay, so it shows me just that. Okay, or if you want to change this up to course like this, so it'll show you the course. Any question? All right. So that takes care of number 6. Oh, I'm close to time. Okay. Let's see, 6, 7. We just have 7 and 8 left. Okay, so what we'll do is, you know, if you want, we can go about 10 minutes over, but we might need to bleed into the next part. So let's pick up on Thursday. I will finish up with explaining sets, and then we will work with functions or methods. That's really easy. So that kind of wrap up most of the basic component of Python. And then in the lab, if you already look at the lab for this week, let me preview that so you can see. We're going to do a little bit more fun things. So we are going to do some random characters or pseudo-random, and I'll talk a little bit more about pseudo-random. We are going to work with CSV files. So for those of you who already done this before for data analysis, that's pretty easy. But you know, we can take a look at how you can download some fun data and be able to make Python read it. And then we will do some module. Okay, so I'll show you how you can do that, and then a class. So in the lab, there are only 4 parts. The program is a little bit more longer than our regular exercise in the assignment today, but we will also finish up with number 7 and 8 from the assignment, and then address the 4 exercises for the lab. Okay. Okay, any question? Okay, so you can please type in your name in the chat, but I do look at the Zoom log when I take attendance tonight. So once it's done, I will pull the Zoom log for it, but please put your name into the chat. And then if you have any questions, you can stick around. I'm going to go ahead and pause recording, and then I will see you again on Thursday at 5 p.m. Thank you.